In 1958, a young expectant mother was given a devastating warning. Doctors told her that the child she carried would be born disabled, likely blind, and they advised her to terminate the pregnancy. She refused. She chose to continue, trusting a conviction deeper than medical certainty. Decades later, that child would become the most recognizable blind tenor in the world. But recognition came with shadows of its own. In 2005, while drinking wine at his vineyard in Tuscany, Andrea believed he had been poisoned and was rushed to the hospital. Authorities later dismissed the incident as a hoax, yet the sense of vulnerability lingered. It never fully left him. Years later, during the global lockdown of 2020, comments he made publicly ignited a wave of backlash that escalated into credible death threats. The danger became so real that he left the country. And in 2023, a seemingly ordinary family Christmas dinner exposed long-buried fractures, revealing private pain that had never reached the public eye. This is the story that unfolded beyond the stage lights. Andrea Bocelli was born on September 22, 1958, in a small rural village called Leicester. It was a quiet place, still marked by the aftermath of war, where daily life moved slowly and resources were scarce. His parents ran a family farm spanning 120 hectares. The land produced wine, sold machinery, and demanded relentless physical labor. Electricity was unreliable, and survival depended on the soil beneath one's feet. Like most families in the area, the Bellis lived by the rhythms of agriculture. From an early age, Andrea was part of that cycle. Long workdays, seasonal harvests, and evenings gathered around shared meals. Before he ever took his first breath, his future was already under scrutiny. Doctors diagnosed him with congenital glaucoma and warned his mother that her son would almost certainly be blind. They pressed her to end the pregnancy. Eddie refused. Years later, she would tell Andrea that she never doubted her decision. Those words became foundational to him, a quiet certainty that his life had been chosen even when the odds were against it. His childhood was marked by hospitals and extended treatments. Physicians tried everything to preserve his sight, including methods that sound unimaginable today. Leeches were placed on his eyes in desperate attempts to relieve pressure. Despite the pain and uncertainty, Andrea retained partial vision until the age of 12. During long nights in hospital rooms, his mother played classical records beside his bed. The music softened the fear. Sound became a refuge, a place where suffering receded. By the age of 3, his vision had deteriorated enough to make ordinary movement dangerous. Walking through vineyards carried risk. Running was nearly impossible. But as sight faded, hearing sharpened. Andrea began imitating bird calls, animal noises, and melodies that drifted through the house. Family gatherings echoed with Tuscan folk songs, and those sounds settled deeply within him. As the visible world narrowed, his inner world expanded. He told himself stories, imagined distant places, and slowly, music and imagination fused into a single language. 2 years later, his younger brother Alberto was born. Together, they grew up among olive trees and grapevines, sharing meals at rough wooden tables built from leftover farm wood. There was laughter, rivalry, and affection. Often, Andrea would climb onto a bench and sing as if it were a stage. Even then, there was a pull toward performance, an instinct to be heard. At 6 years old, in 1964, he began piano lessons. Unable to rely on sight, he learned through touch. His fingers memorized the keyboard. His ears memorized structure and tone. His mother continued playing records, and Andrea followed each note by feel. By 8, he had added the flute and saxophone to his studies. At school performances, classmates sometimes mocked him. His impairment set him apart. Still, he persisted. In 1972, at just 14, he entered a singing competition in Vario. He won with O Solio. The victory revealed something essential. Music could lift him beyond pain, beyond limitation. It offered an escape and a direction. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1970, during a soccer game, a ball struck his face with violent force. The impact caused a brain hemorrhage. In an instant, the remaining vision he had left was gone. Doctors intervened once more, but nothing could reverse it. At 12 years old, Andrea became completely blind. The darkness arrived suddenly. He had to relearn the piano entirely by touch. He learned Braille. Each step forward carried frustration and grief, yet music grew brighter. It became the one part of his life that still felt whole. School grew more difficult. Some classmates bullied him. They whispered. They laughed. At night, when the house fell silent, Andrea sat at the family piano and composed simple melodies in secret. Those hours became his sanctuary. Pain turned into sound. Anger transformed into notes. He learned to read music in Braille and continued mastering instruments. What began as survival slowly evolved into purpose. In the 1970s, he attended secondary school near Pisa. He dictated essays, studied from Braille textbooks, and developed a deep love for literature. At times, he skipped class to wander the Tuscan hills, memorizing poetry while quietly struggling with depression. In 1980, he enrolled at the University of Pisa to study law. He commuted by train and supported himself by tutoring other blind students. He worked relentlessly, not to satisfy others' expectations, but to meet his own. At night in the early 1980s, he sang in piano bars. The rooms were smoky, the crowds loud, the pay modest. He performed songs like My Way, using the tips to survive and continue his studies. Those nights shaped his voice. They taught him how to command a room, how to sense an audience without seeing it. In 1987, at one of those piano bars, he met Andrea Bocelli. She was 17. He was older. People noticed the difference and talked, but she listened. She helped him read lyrics and describe the world he could not see. They married in June 1992. She stood beside him through years of uncertainty, and even after their marriage ended in 2002, she remained connected to his life through their 2 sons. Andrea earned his law degree in 1986 and briefly practiced as a defense lawyer. But by then, another path was already calling, one that had been forming since childhood, guided not by sight, but by sound. The legal career he had worked so hard to build was stable and respected, but it left him hollow. The structure was there, the discipline, the security, but something essential was missing. During a case involving a street musician, a realization settled in with unsettling clarity. Music was not simply something he loved. It was the center of his life. Staying in law would mean denying that truth. So he walked away, choosing uncertainty over comfort. In 1992, everything changed. Andrea was 34 years old, blind, and still singing in piano bars around Florence when his voice reached the right ears. Zucchero was searching for a singer to record a demo of a new song, Miserere. Andrea was invited to try it. He sang the piece once. That single take was enough. The demo was rough and quickly recorded. Andrea followed spoken directions because he could not read the sheet music. He was nervous, unsure if he belonged in that room. Ennio Morricone read aloud words of encouragement written about him, and Andrea found the strength to continue. When the demo was sent to Luciano Pavarotti, the reaction stunned everyone involved. Pavarotti reportedly said the voice was so strong that his own presence was no longer necessary. Miserere spread rapidly across Europe. Radio stations played it relentlessly. Almost overnight, Andrea moved from obscurity into public view. On December 11, 1993, he made his opera debut as Macduff in Macbeth at Teatro Verdi in Pisa. The pressure was overwhelming. Mid-performance, his nerves caused him to forget his lines. Instead of stopping, he trusted his voice and pushed forward. The audience rose to its feet. In that moment, he understood something lasting. His voice could carry him through fear, uncertainty, and failure. Later that year, he toured Europe with Zucchero. In Milan, he sang Miserere before a crowd of 50,000 people. After that night, he never returned to piano bars. In February 1994, he entered the Sanremo Music Festival as a virtual unknown. He performed Il mare colmo della sera and won first place with record-breaking scores. During rehearsals, he tripped over cables and badly bruised his knee. He performed through the pain. The emotion in his voice stunned both judges and audiences. In November 1995, his debut album was released. Within weeks, it sold over 300,000 copies. Millions more followed worldwide. That same year, he performed at the White House. In 1996, he recorded Time to Say Goodbye with Sarah Brightman. The song shattered records across Europe and sold more than 12 million copies globally. A blind child from rural Tuscany had become a defining voice of his era. In 1998, Andrea Bocelli stepped onto the stage at La Scala in Milan as Rodolfo in Puccini's La Bohème. It was one of the most demanding and scrutinized stages in opera. Some critics argued that his tenor leaned too close to pop, that his style did not meet traditional expectations for a La Scala debut. But while reviews debated, audiences responded decisively. Every performance sold out. The production generated an estimated €2 million, an extraordinary figure for an opera run at the time. Many ticket buyers had never imagined attending La Scala. They came because of his recordings, and because of the story of a blind tenor whose voice spoke directly to emotion. His presence in that historic hall quietly challenged the boundary between classical tradition and popular appeal. The success demonstrated that a crossover artist could fill one of opera's most revered spaces with ease. That momentum carried into 1999 with the release of the album C. The record marked a turning point in his career. It included The Prayer, a duet with Celine Dion that would become inseparable from his public identity. The song earned 2 Grammy nominations, one for Best New Artist and one for Best Pop Collaboration. The Best New Artist nomination was especially striking. It was the first time in 38 years that a classical singer had been recognized in that category. C topped the Billboard Classical chart and remained there for 22 consecutive weeks, setting a new record. The Prayer went on to win a Golden Globe and received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. Through that album and that duet, Bocelli moved far beyond the classical world and into homes across the globe. It became clear that he was no longer seen solely as an opera singer. He had become a true crossover star. As his popularity expanded, resistance grew alongside it. In 2000, he sang the title role in Werther at London's Covent Garden. This time, the backlash was intense. Critics accused the production of diluting opera to appeal to mass audiences. Some claim that his blindness limited his ability to engage with the visual language of the stage and weakened his acting. Bocelli responded by rejecting the idea that sight defined performance. He argued that blindness had sharpened his listening and deepened his emotional instincts. He said he lived inside the music itself, independent of visual cues. The debate spilled into newspapers and television. Fans openly challenged critics, and arguments emerged over what opera should be allowed to become. While that controversy played out in public, Bocelli quietly prepared a very different project. In 2002, he released Sacred Arias, an album partially recorded inside the Vatican's Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva. The church's natural acoustics wrapped around his voice, creating a resonance no studio could replicate. Sacred Arias sold more than 5 million copies worldwide. It became the best-selling classical album by a solo artist in history, reached the top of classical charts in 20 countries, and earned the Brit Award for Album of the Year. The legal career he had built was stable and respectable, but it left him feeling hollow. Then, during a case involving a street musician, something shifted. Watching someone live entirely through sound and performance, Andrea understood what he had been resisting for years. Music was not simply part of his life. It was the core of it. With that realization, he walked away from law and chose uncertainty instead. Everything changed in 1992. Andrea was 34 years old, blind, and still singing in piano bars around Florence when he was heard by Zucchero Fornaciari. Zucchero was searching for a voice to record a demo of a song called Miserere. Andrea sang it once. That single take was enough. The recording was rough and hurried. He could not read the sheet music, so he followed spoken cues, relying entirely on memory and instinct. He was terrified. At one point, Ennio Morricone read aloud words of praise that had been written about his voice, and those words steadied him just enough to continue. When the demo reached Luciano Pavarotti, the reaction stunned everyone involved. Pavarotti reportedly said the singer was so extraordinary that he himself was no longer needed. Miserere exploded across Europe. Radio stations played it endlessly. Almost overnight, Andrea stepped out of obscurity and into public view. On December 11, 1993, he made his opera debut as Macduff in Macbeth at the Teatro Verdi in Pisa. The pressure nearly overwhelmed him. Mid-performance, he forgot his lines. Instead of freezing, he leaned into his voice and let it carry him forward. The audience rose in a standing ovation. In that moment, he understood something fundamental. His voice could guide him through fear, doubt, and failure. Later that year, he toured Europe with Zucchero. In Milan, he sang Miserere in front of 50,000 people. After that night, he never returned to piano bars. In February 1994, he entered the Sanremo Music Festival as a complete unknown. He performed Il Mare Calmo della Sera and won first place with record-breaking scores. During rehearsals, he tripped over cables and bruised his knee badly. When he sang through the pain, The raw emotion stunned everyone in the room. In November 1995, his debut album was released. Within weeks, it sold 300,000 copies. Millions more followed around the world. That same year, he performed at the White House. In 1996, he recorded Time to Say Goodbye with Sarah Brightman. The song shattered records across Europe and went on to sell more than 12 million copies worldwide. A blind boy from rural Tuscany had permanently altered the musical landscape. In 1998, Andrea Bocelli stepped onto the stage at La Scala in Milan as Rodolfo in Puccini's La Bohème, entering one of the most demanding and unforgiving spaces in opera. Some critics argued that his tenor leaned too closely toward pop and did not align with strict traditional expectations. Reviews were divided, but while critics debated, audiences responded. Every performance sold out. The production generated an estimated €2 million, an exceptional figure for an opera run at the time. People who had never imagined attending La Scala bought tickets, drawn by his recordings and by the story of a blind tenor whose voice spoke directly to emotion. Quietly, his presence blurred the long-standing boundary between classical music and popular appeal. That momentum continued in 1999 with the release of C. The album marked another turning point. It included The Prayer, a duet with Celine Dion that would follow him for years. The song earned 2 Grammy nominations, one for Best New Artist and one for Best Pop Collaboration. The Best New Artist nomination shocked the industry. It was the first time in 38 years that a classical singer had appeared in that category. C topped the Billboard Classical chart for 22 consecutive weeks, setting a record. The Prayer won a Golden Globe and received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. Through a single album and a single duet, Bocelli moved beyond the classical world and into homes everywhere. It became clear that he was no longer only an opera singer. He was now a true crossover star. As his fame grew, so did resistance. In 2000, he sang the title role in Werther at London's Covent Garden. The backlash this time was fierce. Critics labeled the production inauthentic and accused him of diluting opera to appeal to mainstream audiences. Some even claimed that his blindness limited his ability to respond to the visual language of the stage. Bocelli responded by saying that his lack of sight did not weaken his performances, it sharpened them. He explained that blindness had trained his ear and deepened his emotional instincts, allowing him to live inside the music without depending on what he could see. The debate spilled into newspapers and television. Fans argued with critics over what opera should be and who it was for. The controversy exposed a deeper divide between those who believed opera must remain rigidly traditional and those who felt it needed to open its doors wider. While that argument played out publicly, Bocelli quietly prepared a very different project. In 2002, he released Sacred Arias, an album partially recorded inside the Vatican's Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva. The church's natural acoustics wrapped around his voice, creating a depth no studio could replicate. The album went on to sell more than 5 million copies worldwide, becoming the best-selling classical album by a solo artist in history. It topped classical charts in 20 countries and won the Brit Award for Album of the Year. Among its tracks were pieces like Ave Maria, recorded within the historic chapel itself, allowing listeners to hear the space as much as the voice. With the Vatican's support and the album's global reach, sacred music moved beyond church walls and into everyday life across the world. Even then, he continued to explore new territory. In 2004, he released Amore, which included a flamenco-tinged version of Besame Mucho. The blend of Italian vocal tradition and Spanish rhythm surprised many classical listeners. Some praised it as daring and modern. Others dismissed it as too commercial. Over time, the song became one of his most beloved performances. That same willingness to take risks carried him onto the world's largest stages. In 2006, he performed at the closing ceremony of the Turin Winter Olympics, singing Nessun Dorma and Because We Believe. The broadcast reached an estimated 3 billion viewers worldwide, making it one of the largest audiences ever for a classical performance. In that moment, he was not just an Italian tenor on a national stage. He was a symbol of Italian music presented to the entire world. Behind these public triumphs was a strict private discipline. Bocelli has often said that an opera singer must treat the voice the way an athlete treats the body before competition. Before major performances, he avoids alcohol, eats sparingly, and rests as much as possible. He has spoken openly about abstaining from sex before important appearances, believing that every reserve of energy should be preserved for expression. He has explained that excess of any kind weakens the voice. Years of this discipline helped keep his sound strong and consistent, sustaining a career that stretched across decades. By the time these habits became widely known, he had already sold more than 80 million records, surprising many fans who associated his music with effortless romance rather than rigorous control. His global reach continued to expand. In July 2010, he headlined the Celebrate Africa concert at Johannesburg's Coca-Cola Dome during the FIFA World Cup. Around 100,000 fans filled the venue. When he sang Time to Say Goodbye, parts of the crowd were visibly moved to tears. The concert was broadcast internationally and helped push his album My Christmas to more than 3 million sales in the United States alone, despite fierce competition in the holiday market. Once again, he demonstrated that classical and crossover music could dominate spaces typically ruled by pop and rock. That same mixture of courage and risk appeared again years later in a very different context. During Italy's strict lockdown in 2020, Bocelli walked alone into an empty Milan cathedral on Easter Sunday for a solo performance titled Music for Hope. Outside, the city was silent. Inside homes across the world, millions watched the live stream. The event raised approximately 4 million euros for hospitals fighting the virus. Some praised the performance as a moment of comfort during a dark time. Others criticized it as inappropriate while a national death toll continued to rise. Bocelli later admitted that certain reactions left him feeling humiliated and wounded, but he also said he remained proud of having helped hospitals. The moment revealed how fragile the balance between art, grief, and public responsibility had become. While audiences followed his public life, his private world continued to shift. He had married Enrica Senzati in 1992 after 3 years of dating. In 1995, their first son, Amos, was born by emergency C-section after serious pregnancy complications. Bocelli canceled concerts to stay with her, facing early on the tension between career and family. Their second son, Matteo, was born in 1997. By the year 2000, he was performing close to 200 concerts a year. Enrica spent many evenings alone, preparing dinners that sometimes went untouched when he did not return home. The distance between them grew slowly, more emotional than physical. They separated in 2002. The divorce remained calm and discreet. There were no public scandals, and Enrica later described the separation as emotional rather than rooted in betrayal. They continued living in neighboring villas in Tuscany, and Bocelli reportedly paid around 500,000 euros a year in support so their sons could remain close to both parents. That same year marked the beginning of another chapter. In 2002, at the age of 44, he met 18-year-old Veronica Berti at a party. She would later become both his partner and his manager. They connected quickly over music and their shared Tuscan roots. That evening, he sang Acci di Fata to her, and she later recalled that the room seemed to shrink until only the two of them remained. They moved in together that night, a decision that fueled intense speculation in the press due to their 25-year age difference. Despite the scrutiny, their relationship endured. Veronica gave birth to their daughter Virginia in 2012, and the child would later sing alongside her father on stage. On March 21, 2014, Andrea and Veronica were married at the Sanctuary of Montenero in Italy. Through years of attention and judgment, they have consistently said that age was never the defining issue, connection was. The legal career he had worked so hard to earn was stable and respectable, yet it left him hollow. Then, during a case involving a street musician, something shifted. Watching that man perform, Andrea understood what he had been resisting for years. Music was not simply an interest or a refuge. It was the center of his life. Shortly after, he walked away from law and chose a future defined by uncertainty. That decision began to bear fruit in 1992. Andrea was 34, blind, and still singing in piano bars across Florence when he was heard by Zucchero. The singer-songwriter was searching for a voice to record a demo of a new song called Miserere. Andrea sang it once. That was all it took. The recording was rushed and imperfect. He followed spoken instructions because he could not read the sheet music. Fear ran through him as he sang. Enrica, standing nearby, read aloud written compliments meant for him, and those words steadied his nerves just enough to continue. When the demo reached Luciano Pavarotti, the response stunned everyone. Pavarotti reportedly said the singer was so exceptional that he himself was no longer needed. Miserere soon swept across Europe. Radio stations played it endlessly. Almost overnight, Andrea stepped out of obscurity and into public view. On December 11, 1993, he made his operatic debut as Macduff in Macbeth at Teatro Verdi in Pisa. The pressure nearly overwhelmed him. Mid-performance, he forgot his lines. Instead of freezing, he leaned entirely into his voice. The audience rose to its feet. In that moment, he realized his voice could carry him through failure, fear, and doubt. Later that year, he toured Europe with Zucchero. In Milan, he sang Miserere before a crowd of 50,000 people. After that night, he never returned to piano bars. In February 1994, he entered the Sanremo Music Festival as a complete unknown. He performed Il mare calmo della sera and won first place with record-breaking scores. During rehearsals, he tripped over cables and bruised his knee. He sang through the pain, and the emotion in his voice stunned the judges and audience alike. In November 1995, his debut album was released. It sold more than 300,000 copies within weeks, followed by millions worldwide. That same year, he performed at the White House. In 1996, he recorded Time to Say Goodbye with Sarah Brightman. The song shattered records across Europe and sold more than 12 million copies globally. A blind boy from rural Tuscany had altered the sound of popular music. In 1998, Andrea Bocelli stepped onto the stage of La Scala in Milan as Rodolfo in Puccini's La Bohème. It was one of the most demanding stages in the world. Critics were divided. Some wrote that his tenor leaned too close to pop, that his style did not fit their expectations of a La Scala debut. Yet while reviews debated, the audience spoke clearly. Every performance sold out. The production earned an estimated €2 million, an extraordinary figure for an opera run at the time. Many who had never considered attending La Scala bought tickets, drawn by his recordings and by the story of a blind tenor whose voice seemed to reach straight into emotion. Without announcing it, his presence challenged the rigid boundary between classical tradition and popular appeal. That momentum carried into 1999 with the release of C. The album marked a turning point. It included The Prayer, a duet with Celine Dion that would follow him for years. The song earned 2 Grammy nominations, including Best New Artist, an astonishing moment, as it was the first time in 38 years that a classical singer had been nominated in that category. C topped the Billboard Classical chart for 22 consecutive weeks, setting a new record. The Prayer won a Golden Globe and received an Academy Award nomination. With that album, Bocelli moved decisively beyond opera houses and into homes around the world. He was no longer only an opera singer. He had become a true crossover star. As his fame grew, resistance intensified. In 2000, he sang the title role in Werther at London's Covent Garden. The backlash was severe. Critics accused the production of being inauthentic, of diluting opera for mass appeal. Some even argued that his blindness limited his ability to respond to the visual language of the stage. Bocelli answered by saying the opposite was true. He explained that blindness sharpened his ear and his emotional instinct, allowing him to live inside the music without distraction. The debate spilled into newspapers and television, igniting arguments about what opera should be and who it should serve. While that controversy played out, he quietly prepared a different kind of work. In 2002, he released Sacred Arias, partially recorded inside the Vatican's Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva. The natural acoustics wrapped around his voice in a way no studio could replicate. The album sold more than 5 million copies and became the best-selling classical album by a solo artist in history. It topped classical charts in 20 countries and won the Brit Award for Album of the Year. Pieces like Ave Maria, recorded within the chapel itself, carried the sound of the space into the music. With Vatican support and global reach, sacred music moved beyond church walls and into everyday life. Even after that success, he continued to experiment. In 2004, he released Amore, which featured a flamenco-infused version of Besame Mucho. The blend of Italian lyricism and Spanish rhythm surprised listeners. Some praised its boldness. Others dismissed it as too commercial. Over time, the song became one of his most beloved recordings. In 2006, he stood at the closing ceremony of the Turin Winter Olympics and sang Nessun Dorma and Because We Believe. The broadcast reached an estimated 3 billion viewers worldwide. In that moment, he was no longer just an Italian singer on a national stage. He was a symbol of Italian music before the entire world. Behind the public triumphs was a life shaped by discipline. Bocelli has often said that a singer must treat the voice as an athlete treats the body. Before major performances, he avoids alcohol, eats lightly, rests extensively, and has spoken openly about abstaining from sex to conserve energy. He believes excess dulls expression. Years of this routine preserved the strength and consistency of his voice. By the time fans learned how strict his private life was, he had already sold more than 80 million records. His global presence continued to grow. In July 2010, he headlined the Celebrate Africa concert at Johannesburg's Coca-Cola Dome during the FIFA World Cup. Nearly 100,000 people filled the venue. When he sang Time to Say Goodbye, sections of the crowd were moved to tears. The concert was broadcast internationally and helped push his album My Christmas to sell more than 3 million copies in the United States alone. Once again, he proved that classical and crossover music could dominate spaces typically ruled by pop and rock. That same willingness to take risks appeared again in 2020. During Italy's strict lockdown, Bocelli entered an empty Milan cathedral on Easter Sunday for a solo concert titled Music for Hope. The city outside was silent. Millions watched from their homes. The event raised roughly €4 million for hospitals battling the virus. Some praised the performance as a moment of comfort. Others felt it was inappropriate as the death toll climbed. Bocelli later admitted that parts of the reaction left him feeling humiliated, but he also expressed pride in having helped. The moment revealed how fragile the balance between art, grief, and public responsibility had become. While his public life unfolded, his private life shifted repeatedly. He married Enrica Senzati in 1992 after 3 years together. In 1995, their first son, Amos, was born by emergency cesarean section after serious complications. Bocelli canceled concerts to remain at her side, confronting early on the tension between family and career. Their second son, Matteo, was born in 1997. By 2000, Andrea was performing nearly 200 concerts a year. Enrica often prepared dinners that went untouched when he failed to return home. The distance grew quietly. In 2002, they separated. The divorce was calm, without scandal. They continued living in neighboring villas in Tuscany, and Bocelli reportedly paid substantial annual support so their sons could remain close to both parents. That same year, a new chapter began. At 44, he met 18-year-old Veronica Berti at a party. She would later become both his partner and his manager. They bonded quickly over music and their shared Tuscan roots. That night, he sang Acci di Fata to her, and she later said the room seemed to narrow until only the two of them existed. They moved in together immediately, fueling rumors because of their 25-year age gap. Despite the speculation, their relationship endured. In 2012, Veronica gave birth to their daughter, Virginia, who later began singing alongside her father on stage. On March 21, 2014, Andrea and Veronica married at the Sanctuary of Montenero. For them, shared values, music, and love of their land mattered more than numbers. Their middle son, Matteo, followed his own careful path. Born in 1997, he grew up beneath the weight of his father's fame. He sang as a child but avoided performing for Andrea, choosing instead to sing privately for his mother. He learned piano at 6 and studied music, yet hesitated to pursue a public career, fearing constant comparison. That changed in 2018. At 18, Matteo released the duet Fall on Me with his father. The song spread rapidly online and marked his international debut. Andrea spoke openly about advising his son to remain humble and remember that applause fades. Since then, Matteo has performed at major events, including the wedding of Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker, and released his own albums. His career remains linked to his father's legacy, yet distinctly his own. Beneath these later successes lies the story that began before Andrea's birth. In 1958, while pregnant, his mother Eddie was hospitalized with appendicitis. Doctors warned her that the baby might be disabled and urged her to end the pregnancy. A devout Catholic, she refused. Andrea was born with congenital glaucoma and lost his sight completely at 12. In 2018, he spoke publicly about his mother's decision in support of pro-life causes in Italy. Many were moved. Others criticized him for using a deeply personal story to address a complex political issue. For Bocelli, however, that moment remains central to his identity and shapes how he speaks about life, faith, and art. His body has faced visible trials as well. In July 2010, days before a major concert, he was thrown from a horse in Tuscany and fractured several ribs. Doctors advised rest. He performed anyway, binding his chest tightly beneath his clothes. Reporters wrote about the strain and pain. For fans, the image of a blind singer standing on stage despite injury became a symbol of his relentless commitment. Life on his vineyard brought its own strange episode. After losing his sight, Bocelli developed a heightened sense of smell, making him unusually sensitive during wine tastings. In 2005, he detected an odd scent in a bottle and believed something was wrong. The situation escalated, and he was hospitalized after drinking wine he feared had been poisoned by rivals. Authorities later ruled it a hoax, but the story spread quickly, revealing how fame can breed paranoia as easily as admiration. The year 2020 brought further turmoil. In addition to the cathedral concert, his comments about lockdowns and personal freedom sparked outrage. Critics accused him of encouraging dangerous behavior. The backlash intensified, reportedly leading to death threats and a temporary move to the United States for safety. It was another reminder of how swiftly public favor can turn. Even within his family, tension surfaced. Amos, the eldest son, drifted away from music, choosing business instead. Watching Matteo rise reignited unspoken rivalry. The brothers remained in contact, but something lingered beneath the surface. In 2023, during a private Christmas dinner in Tuscany, they finally spoke openly about pressure, expectations, and distance. That evening marked a quiet reconciliation. Andrea later shared reflections on family unity, reminding audiences that even famous families must work through pride and hurt. By 2025, Andrea Bocelli's life had grown too expansive to fit into headlines alone. It had become a story shaped by faith, controversy, discipline, and sound, one that demanded to be told in full. In September of that year, his story reached a new kind of audience. Andrea Bocelli, Because I Believe premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, opening a window into parts of his life that had rarely been seen. Viewers watched intimate footage from his childhood in Tuscany, moments surrounding the soccer accident at age 12 that marked the final loss of his sight, and quiet scenes from behind the curtain at the Grammys. The film wove together family memories, conversations with longtime collaborators, and archival material from his earliest years. It earned nearly $5 million worldwide in its opening weekend and became the highest-grossing music documentary of 2025 at that point. Released to coincide with the 30th anniversary of his career, the film functioned as both a celebration and a reckoning, an honest look not only at triumph, but at the physical and emotional cost of reaching it. Critics praised its restraint and emotional clarity, noting how it allowed success and sacrifice to exist side by side. That same year brought another milestone that had been decades in the making. At the Grammy Awards in Los Angeles on February 25, 2025, Bocelli won Best Opera Solo Performance for All'alba Vincero, recorded live during his residency in Napa Valley. The performance, delivered before a crowd of 15,000, carried the balance of control and feeling that had defined his voice for years. He won against figures such as Placido Domingo and Joyce DiDonato, making the moment even more striking. After numerous nominations across his career, this marked his first solo Grammy win in that category. He was 67 years old. In his acceptance speech, he thanked his family, his collaborators, and the audiences who had followed him for more than 3 decades, grounding the moment in gratitude rather than victory. His connection to global audiences continued beyond music halls. On December 5, 2025, Bocelli performed Nessun Dorma at the FIFA World Cup 2026 final draw in Washington, D.C., sharing the stage with pop artist Robbie Williams. Around 2,000 fans watched inside the arena, while more than 1 billion viewers followed the broadcast worldwide as the groups were revealed for the expanded 48-team tournament. It was his third appearance at a FIFA event, following earlier ceremonies in 2006 and 2010. Organizers once again chose him for his ability to transcend language and genre. During the event, FIFA announced a $1 million donation to the Andrea Bocelli Foundation to support music education for children. Clips of the performance spread rapidly online, turning what might have been a procedural event into a shared cultural moment. Just weeks earlier, he released a far more intimate project. In November 2025, Bocelli unveiled a family Christmas single titled The Greatest Gift, recorded with his children Matteo and Virginia. Filmed among the vines of their Tuscan vineyard, the song included a solo from Virginia, just 10 years old, quietly suggesting that the family's musical lineage would continue. The video reached 3 million views on YouTube within its first week and became one of the fastest-growing holiday releases of the year. Critics noted the warmth of the arrangement and the natural blend of the 3 voices. Behind-the-scenes footage showed the family laughing and celebrating between takes, giving the project the feeling of an open door rather than a performance. A limited vinyl release sold out in under 48 hours, with proceeds directed to the family's foundation. By 2025, all of these strands, artistic, personal, and philanthropic, had come to define his public life. Andrea Bocelli's net worth surpassed $100 million, built on more than 90 million records sold, global tours, and ventures such as his luxury wine brand. Yet he has often said that financial success is not the measure he values most. That distinction belongs to the Andrea Bocelli Foundation. In 2025 alone, the foundation supported roughly 1,000 children living in extreme poverty and reached more than 5,000 people through programs focused on education and the arts. Among its most significant initiatives that year was the launch of Braille music programs in Haiti, providing blind students with tools to read and perform music independently. Bocelli personally visited several project sites, including a school where children performed his songs using Braille notation. In October 2025, he was awarded the United Nations Global Humanitarian Award in recognition of this work. The Foundation's annual report showed a 30% increase in funding compared to the previous year, a sign that its reach was still expanding. For a man whose life began with doubt about whether it should continue at all, the legacy he continued to build was no longer defined solely by applause, but by access, opportunity, and belief passed on to others.